Hey everybody, Jay Reale here at ebodyboarding.com headquarters to discuss a topic that's enshrouded in a bit of mystery in the bodyboarding world over the years, and that is rail ratios. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you've ever done any bodyboard shopping or research on bodyboards, you've heard terms like 60-40 rails or 50-50 rails or even 70-30 rails. Those are very rare. What does that mean? Well, that's an expression of percentage of the bottom rail as compared to the top rail, also known as the chine, C-H-I-N-E. So this board, for example, is the Tribe Reale Deal. This is a 60-40 rail on this board, which means 60% of the rail surface is the bottom and 40% is the top. So obviously, the top piece is a smaller percentage of the rail. It's a smaller surface than the bottom part of the rail, which is the 60% of the rail. Now, this is a 60-40, as I said. This is a BSD board, and you can see the top and the bottom rail are equal in size. So this would be a 50-50 rail. Now, I will say the standard in the bodyboarding world is a 60-40 rail. It has been the case since the 80s. The very first ever bodyboards that came out in the early 70s were like 90-10. Then the first Mach 7s that came out in 1982, which were then the gold standard of bodyboards, were about 80-20 rails. So what does that mean to you as a bodyboarder and how that affects the ride? Well, in a nutshell, turning a bodyboard is all about creating friction, right? So if you lean in one direction while you're bodyboarding, you want friction on the rail surface that is in the water. And generally speaking, that is the bottom rail. So therefore, in theory, the larger the bottom rail, the more friction you're going to get against the water, and therefore the board's going to turn better and hold an edge better. What's the downside of that? Friction equals slower speeds, basically. So you have a bigger bottom rail, you're going to slow the board down. Yes, it is very minimal, the difference, but it is there. So the optimal scenario would be a bottom rail that doesn't create too much friction, but just enough to help the board turn. And that is why the standard in bodyboarding these days is now a 60-40 rail. 60% bottom rail is going to give you enough friction to make the turn, but not so much friction that it's going to slow you down. So 60-40 on the top, you're going to get a fast board that's not going to have too much friction. Now, a 50-50 rail will have a little more speed because you have less bottom rail in the water, so therefore less friction. So it's up to you what you go with. I can tell you from my years of experience, having tried both 50-50 and 60-40, it's really hard to tell the difference, to be honest, in my opinion, but it could be a psychological thing, but I can tell you that 60-40 is the status quo. So if you're ever shopping for a bodyboard and you don't see the rail ratio, you can bet that it's probably 60-40. So you choose what rail ratio is going to work for you. I can tell you the status quo these days, 60-40, seems to work for most riders. So check the descriptions of the boards that you're shopping for. If they don't mention a rail ratio, it's going to be a 60-40 rail. And if they do, they may have something close to that.